Welcome to Locked On NBA. On today's show, the Celtics run away with Game 1. Are the Mavericks in trouble, or was that just a one-off performance? Plus, is Dan Hurley the right coach to help the Lakers return to title contention? All of that and more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On NBA. Welcome to Locked On NBA Friday. Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. The Celtics beat the Mavericks 107-89 in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Kristaps Porzingis returned. He had 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 blocks in 20 minutes. And the Celtics made 16 three-pointers as a team and dominated this one. The Mavericks were down by 29 in the first half. They did cut the deficit to 8 in the third quarter, but the Celtics turned around, pushed that lead back to 22 by the end of the third quarter. Again, just a dominant win to start off the finals. Adam, where do you want to start with the Celtics?
You got to start with Kristaps Porzingis. He's back. He's coming off the bench, and he was unbelievable in that first quarter. I believe it was 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 block shots right off the bat, and his impact was all over the place. It was dominant, and this Celtics team all year has been great, especially when they get a lead. They're good all the time, but they're really good when they get a little bit of comfort. He provided that comfort in this game with some of the big-time plays that he made. His defense was unbelievable, but his shot-making early on put this game, opened it up to, I think, a 17-point game early. And to me, the Celtics were impressive for most of the game, but that first quarter is what did it, and he was the biggest catalyst.
They absolutely set the tone in that game and at the start of the game, and Kristaps Porzingis was such a huge part of it because it was pretty close by the time Porzingis came back in, and then he looks the way he looks, right? He's hitting those three-pointers, those pick-and-pop threes. He's getting those blocks. He does not look like a guy who's missed a month and a half of basketball, and you can almost see Dallas kind of look around like, are you serious with this guy? Like, we thought there would be a little bit of rust, and he just comes out like just on fire. And so I think it was a little bit disarming for the Mavericks. And on the flip side, I thought the Celtics just looked like a team in total control. They had been to the finals before. They looked like it. They came out, they knew what their game plan was, and they just executed. They did all the things that they wanted to do. They won the three-point battle, the math battle that Joe Mazzulla is always talking about. They took away Luka's playmaking. You could just look at the box score and be like, I know exactly what Boston's game plan was, and I know that they executed it well, and that's why it was a blowout win.
The game plan part of this is huge. And honestly, if you like step away from the game and say, okay, what were like the strategic moves? To me, that was it. 1 assist for Luka Doncic, a career low in the playoffs, and it happens in his first finals game. And I don't think it was because he was missing reads. It was clearly a deliberate choice. We'll talk about the adjustment I think he's going to have to make later on. But that was a great game plan. And then the other part of this is you have to get up and make your threes. And I just thought early on, I mean, this game, I don't think anybody missed for the first like 3 minutes both ways. But I thought it was important, some of the shots that the Celtics were getting early to make them confidently. And they had several guys step into and make threes in that first quarter. Somebody tweeted, I saw something earlier that said the Celtics made more threes in the first quarter than the 91 Bulls made in the entire finals, which I think is just one of those funny stats. But making them early to me set the tone, and those guys were ready for it. They were focused and they were confident.
Yeah, the math, the three-point battle is going to be a huge battleground in this series, right? The Mavericks don't get it up as many and don't make as many as Boston, but they weren't like at the bottom of the league either. This was still one of the top three-point shooting teams in the league, and a lot of what they do, right, is Luka Doncic drive, kick out to those guys in the corners and do all that kind of stuff. And that just wasn't there. You mentioned the 1 assist. That's the game plan. If Luka's going to have, what do you even end up with, 30-something points tonight?
Which is even less than your, like, he only had 30 points on 26 shots. So even that part, not that great. Yeah.
But you'll live, even if he has 35 points on more efficient shooting, you'll live with the 1 assist. That's still executing the game plan. And by the way, they had a little bit of a margin to play with here in this one. He could have won for 40 and they still would have won this game. So that is a huge part of the game plan. And you look at even in the first quarter how quickly they established it. It was from the jump, man. Like the Mavericks 2 for 8 from 3-point range in the first quarter. The Celtics were 7 of 15 in the first quarter. Just right there alone, that's why they had a 17-point lead after the first period. Is why Boston just sort of ran away with this thing, even though Dallas came back from 8 points, or they made it an 8-point deficit in the third quarter because they started making a bunch of shots that they weren't making. The Celtics went a long stretch without making any shots. They had gone 1 for 7 from 3-point range over the course of the end of the second quarter and beginning of the third quarter, and Dallas was able to climb back into it. But Boston just stayed with their plan, and they just said, we don't care. We're going to keep taking those threes. We're going to keep taking our jumpers. We're going to stick with the plan. And next thing you knew, they were back up 22 points by the end of the third quarter.
Yeah. If you look at Boston did miss some shots in that third quarter, and I know we'll talk about that in the next segment. But if you just step back and look at how this game went, the Celtics followed the script. They did not look disrupted defensively. They got the types of shots they wanted. They played at their pace. They played in control. And Dallas did not. This is not at all. You talk about Luka 1 assist. As a team, they had 9 total assists. And I think to three or four of those came in garbage time. So this was a game where everything went exactly the way Boston would have hoped, not just from a result standpoint, which was phenomenal, but even from a process standpoint. It's the game plan that they wanted to impose. And, now the onus is on Dallas to adjust.
So part of that game plan, too, was that they weren't going to double Luka very much, right? They had to do it sometimes. If you got deep penetration, they were going to send that help from the back line and all those things, but they were going to try not to double him early in the clock. But there was a play, too, it was in the second half, where Luka was starting to kind of get into a groove a little bit, and he comes off of a screen, and Derek White just flies in with a trap, and you could see Luka almost jump, like, whoa, I wasn't expecting the trap. You guys never do this to me. And it forces the steal, and Derek White gets an easy layup on the other end, and I'm just like, so you kind of just build stuff on top of the basic game plan that just give you a little bit more of an edge. And I just feel like the Celtics, their base stuff right now is working better than Dallas's base stuff, or at least it did in game 1. There's going to be other things that we'll get to with the Mavericks and things that they can improve. But I didn't even think that this was especially an awesome Celtics game. I thought their defense was phenomenal. I think there's some things that the Mavericks could do better. But Kristaps Porzingis had 20 points. Jaylen Brown had 22. A lot of guys scored in double figures, but this wasn't a big Jason Tatum game. It wasn't even really a big Jaylen Brown game, except for a couple of pockets in this one. Kristaps Porzingis had a huge first half, but wasn't really there in the second half. I think the Celtics could actually play better than what they did in game 1. And that's the scary thing if you're a Mavs fan.
I mean, I don't know if I would frame it that way. They could play better. They weren't pressed. I mean, part of why the numbers are what they were is that it was balanced. They got exactly what they wanted, 6 guys in double figures. And one guy, though, that we haven't talked about or even mentioned yet, I mean, albeit briefly, I thought this was an A+ game from Jaylen Brown. 22 points. He only took 12 shots, 7 of 12 shooting, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. And honestly, if you'd asked me how many steals and blocks he had, I would have said 5 and 5, because that's what it felt like. They were loud. He was everywhere. And when you talk about the game plan tonight, number one, you wanted to disrupt Kyrie Irving. He had a horrible game. And you wanted Luka to take away his passing, in particular on the lob and to the corners. And I think the way they did that, you said they didn't double him. It was almost like they were going to double him at the rim, which I know is not a double. You're just going to meet him at the rim. But Jaylen Brown oftentimes was the guy meeting all of the dribble penetration there and just making big time plays, playing the passing lanes. And it just was perfect execution. So you tip your hat. But Jaylen Brown, to me, I know this is the silly game because finals MVP is one of those ones where if the Celtics win, it'll be an interesting discussion because they don't have a clear cut who is the guy that would win that every time. Mm-hmm. If I were doing the at-home scoring, I think Jaylen Brown right now just tallied off. Okay, one game through, he's the early favorite for me.
Also, things that Boston didn't do, or where Dallas kind of had an inherent advantage. They have the best player in the series, and they could beat Boston on the boards, I thought might be a game plan for them coming into this one. Well, they didn't. They had 43 rebounds. Boston had 47. Both teams had 10 offensive rebounds. That's a great result if you're the Celtics. Yeah. And then also, Luka was the leading scorer in the game with 30 points, but we mentioned it wasn't a terribly efficient game for him. And Jaylen Brown had 8 fewer points on much more efficient shooting, and I think the Celtics would live with that kind of result, generally speaking. So I think that was a good sign for them, too, just looking at the box score. All right. What can the Dallas Mavericks do to bounce back in Game 2? We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. And with the finals here, the finals mean more on Prize Picks, and so do the star players. You get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. And when the finals are over, the hoops action doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball is just getting started with young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make their names for themselves alongside greats like Brianna Stewart and Nyjah Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. And if you have the skills, you could play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. What did you think was the Mavericks' biggest problem in this one, Adam?
Man, it's a tough one. I want to start it by saying this. I thought that the fact that the Mavericks came back in the third quarter, and they didn't necessarily even shoot the ball great in that quarter. There was 2 wide open shots from Kyrie Irving that would have made this game very interesting.
Yep.
But the fact that they were able to some degree, withstand it and punch back makes me think that this series, there's every series after game 1, it's declared over, right? You saw a lot of it's a sweep, across the timeline. It made me think, okay, the Mavs have to adjust, and there's some things that they can do, but I think the series will be closer more often. This will be probably one of the few blowouts that happen in the series. But one of the things they're going to have to do is make the Celtics adjust their game plan. Right now, as you mentioned it, Luka Doncic, 12 of 26. He took 26 shots, which is normal for him, but it shows you when you see the distribution of shots, he was getting a lot of them and not making them. He's got to punish, and he's got to make them second guess that. To me, it's domino number 1, because if they get away with that, you're going to have a lot of these games with 15 or fewer assists.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this series is going to be a lot closer than this one. If I'm a Mavericks fan, I'm not freaking out necessarily by going down 0-1 after game 1 in Boston. And I did see some things in that third quarter that that I liked from Dallas. But one of the things that I'm doing going into game 2 is I'm figuring out a way to slow the game down a little bit and put the ball back in Luka's hands. That's what stood out to me coming out of halftime. It looked like there was a real emphasis on let's slow the game down. Let's get the ball in Luka's hands. Let's get the ball in Kyrie's hands the way that we want to get them. Get to their spots. Let them pick on those mismatches and get to the areas of the court that they want, where I thought in the first half, they were kind of playing into Boston's pace. And Dallas wants to push the pace opportunistically, but they don't want to go up and down and just kind of let it fly. They want to find their mismatches and take advantages of them. And the fact that they didn't, I thought they didn't punish Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard nearly enough in this game. Those guys combined to play 30 minutes in this one, and it didn't ever feel like it was a problem for Boston. And I think for Dallas to win this series, they have to be almost unplayable because Luka's just punishing them over and over and over. And Kyrie also, where he's just blowing by them and Luka's just pushing them under the hoop and getting to his spot. And I thought they did a little bit of a better job of that in the second half than they did in the first half, but they got to do that more, because when you are doing that, when you're getting to that second unit, then you're forcing Boston's defense into rotation. You're forcing them to help, and then you're able to spray out to the three-point line and get your guys going. You also look at this game. They went 0 for 2 on corner threes during the important parts of this game. They got one final corner 3 in garbage time when these teams cleared their benches. 0 for 2 on corner threes. That's Dallas's bread and butter, man. Derrick Jones Jr. and PJ Washington in the corner, and they got none of it.
Well, 0 for 2. I mean, that the 2 to me is as big as the 0. The 0 for
sure.
But I think that is the Celtics' strategy, and that's their game plan. They've been great at it. They're number 1 in the NBA at taking away the corner 3. So it's not like that was luck, and it's not like that was even a surprise game plan. You knew that's what they do a very good job of.
But Luka's the best in the league at generating the threes. So you would think they would meet somewhere in the middle, and it wouldn't be 2 attempts from 3-point range, right? It would be a little bit more.
No question about it. But again, that's why I said it all starts with Luka punishing them more. I think he needs
Right.
if the strategy stays the same in game 2, and I expect that it will. If you're Boston, you're happy with the results. If that strategy stays the same, we need one of those Luka 20-point first quarters that we saw in game 5 of the last round, where it's head down. They're going to guard me this way. I just got to make tough shots, and I've got to make them change their mind about that approach, because everything is downstream of that. They got to crack that. But I think the other guy who's going to have to figure out where he makes an imprint on this game is Derek Lively. And look, youngest player, goes 18 minutes, gets 5 fouls all in the third quarter, had a rough night, had some bad defensive plays, some bad offensive ones. To me, outside of Luka, he then becomes the guy I'm most interested in game 2, because where is he going to make, if they're going to take away the lob, if that's no longer the option, where can he make an impact? Is it more on the offensive boards, which is what I suspect? Okay,
Yep.
How are they guarding you? Luka's going to have his head down, is going to be taking the shots. Then you got to get on the offensive glass. And I just think he's a guy that did not necessarily read how to adjust how they were being guarded. But I think he will with a couple days rest and a little bit of game planning.
I agree. He looked young out there, right? Like, he just looked like, for the first time in a while, like that was the whole thing in the playoffs, is he finally didn't look like a rookie. And this is the finals. It's a little bit different. He did look like a deer in the headlights a little bit in this one. I do think he'll be better going forward. Kyrie Irving's got to be better, just flat out. He had a couple of, cool, just for the Twitter timeline kind of layups and shots that he made, but 6 of 19 overall for 12 points, 0 for 5 from 3-point range. You already mentioned the couple threes that he missed in the third quarter that maybe could have made this a very different kind of game down the stretch. 2 assists. Just didn't do a whole lot. They need more efficient Kyrie Irving play.
You're being so gentle here, Wes. He was atrocious.
Yeah,
This was a D- game for Kyrie Irving, and
he has these, man, like in the playoffs.
He kind of does.
It's every other night kind of thing with him.
Well, here's the thing, because I think he's another one that you just expect. Like you were talking earlier about, did the Celtics, they could play better, and they can. To me, the Mavs can play a lot better, even if nothing else changes. And a lot of that has to come with Kyrie Irving. As I mentioned, those 2 wide open threes. And when I say he had other shots, but 2 of them were wide open, in rhythm, nobody even running out at you. Just take a breath and fire away. And he missed both of them. And they were both in swing moments, that would have changed the complexion of the game if he hit them. He's got to be better. And then he dribbled the ball off his foot tonight, which is just best handle probably in the history of the game. And he had an unforced off your foot dribble one. That to me shows he's shook.
The Kyrie experience is so strange, because he hit maybe the most memorable shot of the whole game, where he hit it over, Al Horford and Jaylen Brown. He hit a shot over where Al Horford actually smacked the ball. He held onto it, and it was the best shot of the game.
Right. Oh, that was an insane shot.
And I think, the casuals, the kids these days who are just not watching the game and just looking at the highlights will be like, oh, Kyrie had a great game. It's like, no, he stunk in this one. But that's sort of the Kyrie experience. He'll have one that just blows your mind, and then sometimes he just disappears, and he goes like he did tonight, 6 of 19 overall. So he needs to be better. You're right. Across the board, they need to be better. Defensively, I thought the Mavericks were actually okay in the half court. Boston had scored 95.5 points per 100 possessions in the half court, according to Cleaning the Glass. That's okay. That's probably where you want them to be. But they need to limit the steals and blocks, because Boston ate in transition. They can't give up that many points in transition. And I do think that their defense will be overall better if they're just making more shots and they're playing in the half court in the first place more often. Yeah. So I think you and I agree here, despite the fact that this was an 18-point blowout and they led by as many as almost 30 points in this one. I don't think it's that. I think these teams are closer. I think we agree on that.
I think there's no question. And the other thing I'll say, and this is a weird sort of cop-out, 4-game series and 5-game series. This was an abnormal amount of rest for both teams. And I think that game 1 will probably, like I said, it'll be even less indicative, in my opinion, of the series than most game 1s. That being said, I do think the Celtics look like the team that had more of a challenge to solve. Like Dallas, it always comes down to Luka and Kyrie have to be good for them to have a chance. Both of them were bad today, so they get blown out. But tip your hat, Boston came prepared. They came confident. They came disciplined. They executed at an unbelievable rate. And they definitely looked like the team that had been there before. And I even thought I was impressed. This is silly, but I was impressed even with how they handled after the game. Not too high. Kind of a game 1. We got it. That's what we were supposed to do. We're far away from the finish.
Other takeaways quickly. Luka did not look right to start this game. And
I can't do this.
but then he kind of looked better as the game went on. So I have no idea. You would have thought the long break would have helped him. Maybe it went the other way where he kind of tightened up.
Yeah.
And then by the time he loosened up, he looked a little bit better. And then the biggest takeaway is Kristaps Porzingis. He only played the 20 minutes tonight. We'll see if he starts game 2, but he looked absolutely fine in this. So these are sort of the things that we were monitoring and the kind of things that we learned coming out of game 1. All right, coming up next, are the Lakers about to make a new coaching hire? And is it the right one for LeBron James and Anthony Davis? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Welcome back to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, covering all things NBA Finals from every angle. But we're moving on from the finals now to talk about who else? The Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are reportedly pivoting from J.J. Redick and zeroing in on UConn coach Dan Hurley to take over as the next Lakers head coach. What do you think about this, Adam? Is this a good hire?
I have way too many thoughts for this, man.
Give them to me.
I have no idea if it's a good hire. I mean, traditionally, college coach coming into the NBA ranks has not worked out. I mean, there's very, very, very few instances where that has worked out. He's obviously been phenomenal at UConn, phenomenal. And he's phenomenal in the ways that I think in theory would translate, or at least in many of those ways. Outside the box thinker, very creative. But, you know, you've seen some of the behind the scenes UConn, Dan Hurley stuff. He's still a college coach yelling and ripping his guys, everybody on the line, like stuff that you look at and you just kind of roll your eyes at because that's not NBA stuff. But what most is interesting to me, because I think he's a brilliant coach, and these young outside the box thinkers seem to be the guys that are succeeding the most in the NBA. But you're talking about LeBron James and Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about coming in here and getting a young team, Mark Dagnott. Okay, we're going to 3 years, build a program, foster it in. You're talking about the oldest player in the NBA, and then alongside Anthony Davis. To me, that's the thing that really intrigues me as I look at that and I go, that seems like maybe something else is going on behind the scenes.
I'm with you. I'm very curious about what's going on with the Redick situation, and I really want the scoop on whatever that is, because you've got Shams reporting a day ago that he's the guy, and that, you know, the Athletic saying they think that JJ Redick could be a Pat Riley type figure, and not even 24 hours later, Woj is going on ESPN saying it's actually Dan Hurley who they're targeting. So I would love to know what's actually going on there. But you're right when you say it's LeBron James and it's Anthony Davis. I remember the Dan Hurley thing. He is a force of a person, right? Like the sideline stuff with yelling at the refs, the way he controls that program, back-to-back championships, it's working at UConn. And I wonder what that looks like if he brings that bravado and that it's my way, the highway type thing. I'm the successful coach.
You wonder?
Well, we saw this
or
already.
You know.
We saw this with LeBron when David Blatt walked in from
Feels
overseas.
Like that.
Very accomplished coach, walked in, lasted a year in Cleveland. And LeBron was like, get this guy out of here. I'm over it. I don't care what you did in Europe. You're in the NBA now coaching my team. It's a different story. So I do wonder. We did get like the LeBron, I guess, sign off via tweet about a year ago that because Dan Hurley has a creative offense. It's very, very vibes of like Shabazz Napier. I like his game. Okay, now we're going to draft him to try to keep you here kind of stuff. So I don't know, man. Whether or not he's the right coach, the wrong coach, we have no idea. My concern in general is the Lakers process in all of this just feels like it's based off of LeBron's social media activity. And if it's not, and that might be the best case scenario, because the other version of this is, oh my God, Dan Hurley went on the radio and said he'd be interested in being an NBA coach. Let's call him up, offer him a contract. I don't know what the process is.
Well, he is a back-to-back NCAA champion. He's a very smart coach, and they play a very smart brand of basketball. And I think when people are looking around at what's successful, those outside the box thinkers who really look at the game and say, hey, it's changing, it's evolving rapidly, we have to evolve as well. I think that's a big part of it. But here's what's really interesting to me.
I just don't know why it was so sudden. Why didn't we hear this?
Maybe
when
it
we were
wasn't
talking about Redick and Borrego, or maybe it was on the DL the whole time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? It sounds like no, if this more just popped up out of nowhere. But here's one thing I will say. The new CBA, there's one interesting thing in the new CBA that's not really being discussed very much about that. Just about how it all operates. You can now sign your own rookies to a 5-year extension You used to be you'd sign him to 4 max. Now you could send him to a 5-year extension when it's not a max player. Why this is big is we're already seeing that teams are probably going to have to get creative and maybe build more of a program than years past. The whole turn your roster over every offseason. Maybe you have your same 2 or 3 guys, but you turn everything else over. I think those are going to become, it's going to be harder and harder to win that way. And you're going to see teams that more try to build a system and build a pipeline. And you have guys that don't play for a year, and then the next year they move up, and then 3 years into the program, they're playing.
I love this take.
More like a college.
Right. The NBA is coming college, and the college is becoming the pros.
Right. It's so true. They're one and done. The NBA has to, get your redshirt freshman.
Transfer portals,
and
all this stuff. Yeah.
And so I do wonder if they look over there and say, one of the things about Hurley that's impressive is not just his coaching his X and O's, but that's a guy that built a program. Yeah. He built a system, and we need a Lakers system in place. Does that work at the NBA level? It is. You laughed at the idea, even if you see it. But it's still silly. It still seems so foreign to, if you're the Lakers, to bank on, hey, we're going to build a program here. But maybe that really is what they're looking at.
He's a brilliant coach. I love his system. I love everything he ran at UConn. I hope he succeeds. I don't understand I don't understand the process by which the Lakers go about making their coaching hires. We've talked about this before. Over the last 20 years, 10 different head coaches. They go through a coach every 2 years on average over the last 2 decades. I understand if you're Dan Hurley why you would want the Lakers job, because at the end of the day, it's still the Lakers job. But I don't know. It's just there's more story here, and I can't wait to find out. All right. It's Friday, which means it's time to count down to the weekend with our weekly power rankings.
I'm not a system player. I am a system player.
Go power rankings. Go power rankings.
What do you got for us this week, Adam?
Well, we know who the number 1 and the number 2 teams are. We don't know what order, but we know who the 2 best teams are this year. I believe that the teams that make the finals, you can't discount them. They belong to be there. But everybody else that came up short, it's fair to speculate on who is the best of the rest. Okay. So I have a power ranking of the 5 best teams that fell short of the finals this year. And look, this is a fully healthy. Some teams were hurt by health this year. So I'm just assuming everybody was healthy. This is my ranking.
All right, let's go.
Number 5, I'm going with the Philadelphia 76ers. This is a team that, surprise, surprise, Embiid wasn't healthy in the playoffs. Big shocker. It's happened almost every single year. But unlike most years, I really do think Embiid was at a different level this year. He was operating at a different level. He was going to be a clear MVP, maybe even unanimous MVP through the first 30 or so games of the year. Gets hurt. Misses a giant chunk, comes back, gets hurt again, and then the playoffs kind of drug his leg up and down. I think if he was fully healthy, and if that team was fully healthy, they would have been the 5th best team not in the finals.
I have no problem with the Sixers being in your top 5. We'll see who they're not above. I've been kind of bullish on the Sixers all season because I'm with you. I just saw a different level from Joel Embiid. Even if the stats weren't dramatically different than when he won the MVP, like he was just playing better basketball. Yeah. And then Tyrese Maxey took another level. And then Kelly Oubre was phenomenal in that series against the Knicks. And I just thought they had figured out how it was they wanted to play. Nick Nurse gets a lot of credit for that too. So I have no problem with the Sixers being here.
Number 4. This gets very controversial, Wes. People are going to hate this segment. They're going to get mad. Number 4, the Minnesota Timberwolves.
What? They were in the conference finals.
They sure were. They did get beat in 5 games. They didn't look necessarily that great by the time they got to the conference finals. They were good. They were good. They might have beaten some overrated teams a little bit. They might have. I just don't know how versatile they were. I think they were a team that were designed for very specific teams and looked good against those ones and were not necessarily designed overall. They're a great team. I think they're on the rise, although we'll see. We talked about the new CBA. They have some tough decisions ahead. But at the end of the day, they were not a good. I think they were the 23rd offense. That's what they looked like in the conference finals, the 23rd offense. And I think that was more indicative of who they really are.
You don't think Bloomberg will help their offense?
Maybe he will.
I mean, he's one of the richest men in the world. Like maybe he's like, hey, CBA, schmeebA. They looked like a team that was designed to beat the Nuggets. They went out and they beat the Nuggets, and they realized, and it was like, okay, we beat, like that was the final scene of the movie, boss battle, done. Like we did it. End credits, roll credits, we're done. And then at the end of the credits, there's like a bonus scene, and they're like, wait, what is this? Oh, now we have to play the Mavericks? Wait, I wasn't ready for this. I already like threw out my popcorn. I'm done. Yeah. And it just that's how the Western Conference Finals felt to me.
Number 3, The New York Knicks. The New York Knicks. Now, I know they lost, but you know what? That team, when OG Anunoby was healthy, was unbelievable. And if you got Julius Randle, which we never got to see, even with him, Mitchell Robinson, this was the most banged up team, and they still almost made it to the conference finals. I think if they were fully healthy, that would have been a scary team. The problem with them was they didn't have any depth, but if they were healthy, they would have had some depth.
Right.
So I think that they belong on this list at number 3.
I'm trying to figure out who's in the top 2 because it's not
Oh.
Dallas and Boston. This is not Dallas and Boston.
It's not
They're
Dallas and Boston. No.
This is the list below them.
Yeah, this is the list below that.
All right. Who's next?
Number 2, the Oklahoma City Thunder. OKC Thunder. They fall to the Mavericks, who were there. The Thunder were incredible. They were more disciplined. They were impressive. They did what they did. They ran into Luka, who had a couple phenomenal games. They had some. They just ran into the Dallas when Dallas was approaching their peak. I think their peak was actually the conference finals so far, but they were a good team. They were very good. I think they would have beaten a lot of teams this year.
They took the Mavericks to 7 games. PJ Washington went to another planet in that series and might be the only reason why it wasn't the Thunder advancing to the next round.
Yeah.
I actually don't hate this. If you go,
They deserve it.
You could
They
do
were
the
the 1
math,
seed.
right?
They were the 1 seed.
They're the number 1 seed during the season. The Mavericks beat the Timberwolves in 5 games, but the Thunder took the Mavericks to 7 games. So there is some sort of weird mumbo jumbo math that you could do to be like, well, actually, OKC was better than Minnesota. And if OKC was better than Minnesota, and Minnesota was better than Dallas, then OKC was better, or not, then Minnesota was better than Denver. And OKC must be better than Denver, right? Or not?
Right. Absolutely not. Denver number 1, the best team not in the finals. Let's go. Jamal Murray was hurt. You saw the numbers. They don't look anything like his previous playoffs, not even just the Minnesota Timberwolves. Also in the Lakers series, he was trash outside of 2 game winners, ironically. But Murray wasn't there. They still went to game 7. They should have been there. Nuggets best team not in the finals. I'm over it, Wes. I'm over it.
We never got a chance to see my Miami Heat healthy. Just discounting them. What if they were totally healthy?
Well, to be honest, the Heat were fully healthy, maybe. But I got to apologize to Pacers fans who I know are just livid right now. They make it all the way to the conference finals and they don't even get an honorable mention here. They deserve they deserve to be upset. Timberwolves fans deserve to be upset. You can send us your hate in the comments.
What a way to send us out into the weekend. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. Again, lock into Locked On NBA every day, Monday to Friday, for all the wall-to-wall coverage of the NBA Finals. Have a great weekend. Enjoy Game 2.